Arts will never be able to challenge power if they continue to exclude us. If I could say to my grandmother that her memory wells me up and stays in my red-stained eyes for days.
And I was upstairs when the door opened. And outside the windows there were these trees. You know, their branches were really thick with snow. And I'm thinking back to the walk when the pin was still lodged deep, keeping my heart together. And I was upstairs when the door opened. And I was still upstairs, and outside the windows there were these trees. You know, their branches were really thick with snow. And I'm thinking back to the walk, and I'm thinking back to the still lodged deep, keeping my heart together. When the pin was still lodged deep, keeping my heart together. Upstairs when the door opened, now in the dark, I pick up my feet to walk on in the forest, and I was still upstairs. Do you remember you were about to tell me things but you'd forgotten? I'm still upstairs and I'm thinking back, and I know that they've taken your life when the pin was still lodged deep, keeping my heart together. And in the dark I can see the branches outside, covered in snow. And they've left the books out. Upstairs when the door opened, now in the dark, I pick up my feet to walk on in the forest. Do we remember how we met? Do you remember you were about to tell me things but you'd forgotten? Both of us in the dark.
I was 4 and in the playground. I was leaning against the wall. My teacher was telling me to go play, Elinor, go play. She pushed me into the playground, and even now it is as vivid as it was then. I felt distant, as if I were in a dream, a sheet of nothingness between me and the playing children. I was stood still, and they were racing round and round the playground, and I was bored, and my hands behind my back scratched off cement. I longed for rainy days when we could play inside, when I could go make art, go read books. I was 15 when the loud noises and bright lights in the classroom got worse. I felt like I was floating for most of my lessons, like I could hear words but I couldn't understand them. And the teacher would ask me a question and I wouldn't know the answer because I couldn't hear the question, and there was a lot of laughter, a lot of children laughing, sounding out my words that felt wrong on my tongue anyway. I hid in the library, hid from the bright lights and loud noise and the acoustics of crowd. It was the librarian at school who was the one to pluck me out of the shadows and ask me what I was writing. I saw my words go up and into her nostrils, down towards her heart, saw an aura mounting and resting on her shoulders, and all around her it was blue, and I'd never see her again, because she took her life when I was at university. They told me she felt too much, she was too intense. When I was a child, I wondered if my nanny was magic, like a good witch. She always made the living room She always made everything whimsical and fun. I still remember one day when she made the sun brighten up the living room and then banish it behind the clouds, then brighten up the living room again, and then banish it behind the clouds again. Even my dad remembers it and can't explain it. She always celebrated my imagination and gifts of drawing, writing, and craft. My nanny grew up in a town called Treville, which is a small village 3 miles northwest of Tredegar in South Wales. The boundary of the Brecon Beacons National Park lies 1 mile to the north of the village. Treville is the highest village in Wales, standing at 1,341 feet. Nanny's parents were the bachelors of the village, both single, both in their 40s. They lived next door. It happened by mistake, them falling in love. At 44 they were married and went on to have 5 children. My nanny was the youngest. Her father worked in the mines, and they also had a small holding. They had pigs, chickens, geese. They had some sheep, goats. Every evening after supper, Nanny walked with her brother Theophilus, Offie, as they affectionately called him, to her cousin's house on the other side of the mountain. This is where she slept, because there was no room for her at home with her parents and 4 older brothers. As her brothers moved on one by one to university, Nanny excelled in school. Her best friend hadn't passed her exams, and Nanny didn't want to leave her behind, so she moved in to look after her parents. Mum was always angry that her uncles, Nanny's brothers, hadn't done more to encourage her to go to university. Islwyn was the oldest and went to Cardiff and did mining engineering. David moved to London and became a physiotherapist. Llewellyn was a policeman, and Offie studied in night school and became a fellow at the Institute of Electricians. He worked on guided missiles, but he was against wars. My grandparents met at a dance. It was love at first sight. It happened by mistake, them falling in love. My grandpa left school at 13 to work down the mines. His teachers had tried to persuade him to stay in school, but his family were desperately poor and they needed the money. He hated the mines. When he left home, he decided to begin saving for a new life in America. 2 weeks before he was due to set sail, his friends invited him out for the night. He made his excuses, but they promised to buy him a pint. As soon as they met, Nanny transformed the darkness and poverty of Wales for Grandpa. She wouldn't move to America, and so Grandpa gave up his ticket and stayed. They were soon married and had 2 daughters who they loved very much. They bought a house in Tredegar that directly faced a hill named the Mountain to the Stars. Grandpa would carry Mum up this hill on his shoulders, and they'd watch the stars together. And there's a film now of Some Yellow Roses, which was my nan's favourite. And then it goes to a video of me blowing out a candle. Then, when my mum was 9, her mother, Nanny, disappeared. One moment she was here, the next she was gone. Poof, just like a candle, burnt out. Then the trays arrived, and the rattles. Mum was told they were made by her mum, but their presents didn't explain where her mum was or why they needed trays or rattles. Mum still has a rattle, kept in a box under the stairs. I've never seen it. Nanny's father had taken to the drink when he'd worked in the mines. It was an afflicted addiction. Today we'd call it an indicator of ADHD. It was the drink that killed him, and when he died, Nanny couldn't cope. The doctors decided because she grieved too long and too wrong, they would lock her up and fry her brain. After a year locked up in an asylum and given electroconvulsive shock therapy, my grandfather asked the doctor, when could Nanny come home? because while her 2 daughters missed her very much, and he most of all, he wants to make sure that Nanny feels supported and safe returning to the roles of mother and wife. Have a new baby. It'll be a distraction, the doctor told him. Grandpa had finally gotten a new job when Mum was 11, her sister 12, and youngest was 9 months old. He was excited to be out of the mines. He believed life was finally on the mend for his family. The day before his new job, he was called down the mines again. They needed a safety officer, and he was the only one with experience. He refused to go, but he had no choice. Other miners would die from this kind of accident, but my grandfather's Welsh male choir singing voice had saved him. His diaphragm had protected his organs. Feathers stroking and caressing. A man in prayer in the graveyard made out of stone. And this is the part when the whole audience starts crying. It is really sad.
One for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl and 4 for a boy.
I feel so ill, outside my hands are clapping.
6
I feel so ill, outside my hands are
I feel
clapping.
so ill, outside my hands are clapping. The windows are open and I feel the air on my mouth. I feel so ill. The windows are open and outside my hands are clapping.
I feel so ill, outside my hands are clapping.
And she knows when we'll go to our graves and how we shall be born. One's for sorrow, 2's for joy. 3's for a girl,
3's for a girl and 4's for a boy. 5's for silver, 6 for gold.
The forest is where I lay my tiredness down beside me. The floor of joy is marked with the pearls of sweat that roll down my chest between my breasts. My heart beats and is awake to a journey. The pearl slides down the skin over my bones, now folded over, folding. I am like a wildness that birthed her, and I am still gifting her too, as a voice speaks through me every time. I hold onto a tree, branches like hands to hold a trunk holding a heartbeat, lungs and breathing. I soar over the waves of grass, high up trees and high up sky, the lonely women who cry in their beds at night. Roll their tongues, roll out a new language, say new words. I am folding paper now, writing secrets in the centerfolds. The edges are not crisp. Instead, they are soft and half-bitten. Lonely here, all the women who birth their babies, who are growing older like a strip of paper. A note written on crumpled paper, a strip of words, because we've got lots left to say. A boat out on the water, her sails made from our wedding dresses, the curtains of our rooms pave out a story. A map of love like sealed envelopes. Old age, it centers us. Falls out from underneath us, old age, it centers us.
walk over rocks and sea in the darkest night, where we lay all of our dreams, in the darkest sky, where all the women wonder why, in the lit up sky covered in stars, in the starry night, women cry. A third baby didn't fix Nanny. She now works in a deli because they can't survive on what the government gives them. Nanny needs to bring in money for her 3 children, a paraplegic husband and Nanny's mother too poorly to live on her own. When Nanny's mother died, her brothers' visits ceased. Nanny rarely saw them after that, and because Grandpa couldn't walk, their access was cut off, and Nanny and Grandpa rarely left Tredegar. Like the leaves that grow on trees, those who escape pop off the branches and the wind takes them and they journey across oceans and seas. All the souls of a past float like stowaways in an involuntary dance, and those left behind are spilled out guts on a fisherman's floor. Both of them died young, within 11 months of the other. They couldn't live without each other because Nanny's mind had gone to dementia, and though she was still in many ways Grandpa's full-time carer, he now became hers too, through reminding her when it was time to get up, get dressed, make breakfast, and though she had no memory for time, she had all the time in the world for the cousins and sickly friends she needed to visit throughout the week, or the birds to feed every morning, or the flowers that needed watering and talking to in the garden. Talking to flowers helps them grow. And I am to be born at 4:25 p.m. by caesarean because my mum's blood pressure is too low and I am too big and I will rip my mum apart. But at 2:30 p.m. a nurse comes in with a big grin and begins to induce my mum. And my heartbeat goes from 200 to 60 and I am born from a mother who goes into shock and the machines are beeping and the blood is shooting and she is dying and she is dead. She has lost 6 pints of blood. She is brought back to life by electricity, and days later she meets me. I have a club foot, and they've put a plaster cast on my leg from toes to thigh. 2 months later, I'll have my first of 3 foot surgeries. For 15 years, electricity is used on my leg to wake up the nerves so I can stand and walk. It will take 6 years for my mum to speak to the doctor who delivered me and confront him about the negligence she received at his hands. It took 6 years for mum's nightmares about my birth to stop. Night terrors of while she lay dying, bleeding to death, she had also given me life. All the professionals that I got sent to see ignored my mother's pleas about my having autism. She was ignored as I would later be, explained away by doctors that it was only oversensitivity. Then last year, after 34 years of attempting to fit into a system that really didn't want me, I bought a one-way plane ticket home to my family. Because I was tired. I'm still reminded of the days when I was locked in the classroom by my teacher because I couldn't find my sleeve to put my coat on, or the time I got detention for not having a pen. I could swear I had more than one. I definitely put them in my bag this morning. I searched again and again, desperately pleading with my teacher to help me look in my bag. At home, when Mum opened my bag, she found 7. I was tired of having to explain the workings of my brain, because I didn't understand it either, only that I was tired of fighting and tired of being assessed. Because assessors cannot see what's inside my head, and I cannot explain why some days I can't get out of bed. I can hear a storm an hour away. I can sniff out 7 different scents in a perfume. I can create any colour you want me to create in 30 seconds, but it takes me almost 20 minutes to do up a shoelace, and there are days when I need help with finding my keys, remembering my appointments, getting dressed, or brushing my hair. 4 days after buying my one-way ticket home, I met him. It happened by mistake, us falling in love. Feeling too much, some days it's wearing,
Wear your heart on my sleeve, my dear.
he said, smiling.
Do we seem different when we drown? When we're spinning on our backs and hardly breathing? And the water's up to our necks and our mouths can barely open wide for all the crying in the dark. Picked out in a brown paper bag, stomping up the mountain now towards the cliffs. 7 sisters overlooking the sea. Do we seem different when we drown? When we're spinning on our backs and hardly breathing? And the water's up to our necks, and our mouths can barely open wide for all the crying in the dark, and feeling my body fall off beneath me.
I stand with my heart heavy, like it'll explode from my chest. Can ribs break? Are they strong enough to contain all of these feelings, all of this love? Tightly now. The breathing, it's harder each day. Breathe lighter, they say, here from the stomach. I feel that I cannot stay here any longer. My hands will first come off, then my feet, then my shoulders and head, then neck, then chest, then knees, all coming off, all mangled from the waist, everything off and rendered. And my heart is so heavy, like it'll explode from my chest, and I cannot do anything with my body anymore. And I cannot do anything without my body either. One day I might find the courage to find the force to push you out of my mouth. I savor you deep within my lungs. You still swim in my veins. Stomping along in Wellington boots in a forest, and you've passed me a stick, and it's big enough to stomp in the ground with, into the earth, into the sky. You're miles ahead, waiting for me on the hill, but I do not make it. I have taken my clothes off. I am running into the sea, and you'll stay at the summit, and I'll stay swallowed by the world. And my hands will come off, and my face, my hair, my hands, my feet, I'll come undone. Be the water that you drink. I'll nourish you, fill you, and we'll be okay. as I swim in your veins, and I think of my grandmother and all the things I never got to tell her, and I grow up without her. I come from a strong line of women.